What?
So I think I'm on. I can't tell if I'm on.
All right, so we ready to get started, guys? Dieter and I are not normally used to presenting, so we're going to do a mic check on him real quick.
Test.
Good?
Good.
Okay, sweet. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. I hope you've had a great day at the forum so far. Thank you especially for coming to our presentation, No E-commerce, No Problem, Best Practices for Driving Traffic and Conversions. So what we're going to talk about today is some effective ways to make the most of your website and really accomplish some of the goals that you're going for with your audience and your content. So let's get into some introductions first. My name is Ellis LeMay. I'm the WordPress Department Director here at Americaneagle.com. So my team manages the production and building of WordPress websites and web applications. And then once those sites and applications are built, we launch them and then support them on an ongoing basis.
And I'm Dieter Hildebrand. I am a front-end developer, technical manager, so I help manage and also develop front-end development for websites.
All right, so what we're going to talk about today, like I mentioned, is conversions for websites. And I think one of the things that makes this a unique talk is that we're talking about this in the limelight of no e-commerce. It's very easy to think about conversions in terms of e-commerce because it's pretty straightforward. Buy a product, you just convert it, right? That's not the case necessarily with content and brochure sites. There's a wider variance of implications there. There's all kinds of strategies you can employ and things you can focus on to shift and shape your website to really make it effective. So to go through our agenda for the afternoon, first we're going to look at what are conversions. I think if we're going to talk about how to make them effective, it's important to define them first. And there are actually different kinds. So stepping through that, I think, will be helpful to the remainder of the presentation. And then for that remainder, we've broken it up into three main buckets. In order to kind of make this as digestible as possible, I thought it would be nice to look at conversions from the standpoint of, first, how do you get traffic, right? How do you position your website to be a destination and bring people to it? And then what do you do when the traffic arrives? So, you know, just like a brick and mortar store, they're in your front door. Now what, right? How are you productive with that and start to put them through your sales funnels and make them engage with your content? And then finally, we'll talk about getting people to come back. To me, that's really where a website really hits that threshold of effectiveness, is when you have people regularly coming to your site, leaving, and coming back to see what you have that's new and exciting. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have an opportunity for questions. All right, so first, what are conversions? Conversions can basically be looked at into two main groups. You've got macro conversions and micro conversions. Now, for the purposes of stepping through the definitions here, I actually do think it's easier to define macro conversions in terms of e-commerce. And like I mentioned at the beginning, it's very straightforward, right? A macro conversion for an e-commerce site is somebody going to the site and purchasing a product. So as we step through this, have in the background of your mind, you know, maybe what some of those macro conversions are for your all organizations and businesses. And I'm going to see if somebody wants to volunteer in a little bit. Micro conversions are smaller little initiatives, smaller little goals that are accomplished along the pathway to a macro conversion. So suppose you are a consulting organization and your macro conversion is onboarding a new client. And so your website represents all of the other clients you've worked with, maybe some case studies and so on. One of your micro conversions might be somebody signing up for your newsletter. It might be somebody spending a particular amount of time on a certain keystone piece of content on your website. So that's sort of the split between micro and macro conversions. Macro are it's the big crowning achievement we want everyone to do on our website. The micro are the smaller little steps along the way to that large macro conversion. So I'm going to throw it out to the group here. Do we have any brave volunteers who would maybe want to share, just real briefly, you know, what is your organization? And in your view, what are some of your macro, or what is your macro and some of your micro conversions? Yes, ma'am?
So my organization is called Bounce Children's Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We support chronically ill kids and their families.
Mm-hmm.
So my macro conversions are make a donation, because we're 100% privately funded. We have no fee for service.
Sure.
Right. Refer a family that needs our support, or volunteer.
Okay. So you got a total of 3, yeah?
I got 3. That's very straightforward.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking about my micros.
Yep.
What we sign up for the newsletter, of course, right? But what other micro conversions can we have? Should we have? Maybe we have, and we're just not recognizing
Sure.
it as that helps get various target audiences to one of those 3 macro conversions.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to think of it, right? And so to your point, a micro conversion there might be, you might actually have to create one. Maybe you have some case studies, or maybe that's not the right term, but maybe you have some content centered around people who have volunteered for the organization and found it really enlightening and gotten other people involved.
Right. We call them testimonials.
Yes. So maybe a micro conversion in your case there would be somebody spending a minimum of 10 minutes on that testimonial page reading and consuming that content, right? Because it's not a for sure thing, but you could extrapolate from that if somebody spends 10 minutes reading something, they're therefore interested and want to engage it further, right?
Right.
We got anyone else who wants to maybe give it a shot? No? All right. Okay, so kind of moving ahead, and I don't mean to move quickly, we just have a lot of material we got to cover in this short amount of time, and I want to leave time for questions at the end. What factors contribute towards achieving conversions, whether they be micro or macro? And so like I mentioned, we split this up into 3 main categories: getting traffic, engaging traffic, and getting that traffic to come back. And you can see in those purple boxes some of the smaller, more granular things that facilitate those conversions and make them capable of happening, right? Everything from speed optimization, which is what I'm going to talk about in just a moment, to things like analytics. And what makes this list unique is that categorically, we've put them here for the time being. You could argue that certain things like analytics could be in each of those boxes because it's important at every phase, right? Every step of the way. So keep that in mind. And if you have any questions about that, by all means, ask us at the end or come chat me up later. All right. So kind of going into that first phase, getting the traffic. What are some things we can do to really make our site a destination, want to pull people in and make them engage with our content? The first thing I want to talk about is speed optimization. And I'm willing to bet that this is probably on a lot of your radars. It generally is for a lot of website owners, because who doesn't want their website to be fast? I like to talk about this in terms of the mobile experience, though. I think this is very relevant from a content strategy perspective. If you think about how website speed will affect mobile visitors, it's quite substantial, right? Because, raise your hand if you looked up something on the web using your phone this week. Every hand should probably go up, right? Raise your hand if you did it today. Again, and I could do the same thing for the last hour. It's how people are consuming information. Now think one step a little bit deeper. When are you doing this and how are you doing it? It's a little funny, but most people are probably looking things up on their phones when they are waiting for the light to turn green, or inching through the carpool line at their kid's school, waiting to pick their kid up, right? Maybe you're using the restroom. The point is that we have all these little nooks and crannies as human beings in our lives. And for people who build, maintain, and own websites, it's important for us to figure out ways to conveniently tuck our content into those nooks and crannies. Having a fast website is a really great step in that direction, because the faster it loads up, the quicker you can engage people. So in terms of speed optimization, what are some things you can do to make your site faster? This is a topic that really excites me. Image file size compression I have found to be probably the biggest single factor. I've optimized a lot of websites, and I've had this funny but equally frustrating experience of doing a bunch of modifications in the code. I think I'm real crafty, and then I find out my website only loads like a millisecond faster, right? But then I've had the experience of optimizing like 3 or 4 images, and all of a sudden it's like jumping, right? And even in the speed reports, I can see the percentage jumping up. Speaking of which, the bottom left-hand corner there, I shared 3 tools that I will use to analyze a website's speed. I would recommend using all of them. GT Metrics, I think, though, is probably the best of the 3. For those of you who are maybe using Google PageSpeed Insights, fun fact, that is an emulated browser. It's not a real test, so you can ask me about that later if you want. I'm pretty passionate about that. But so the takeaway here is compress your image file sizes, right? And to show you how effective this is, I wanted to give you something that you could leave this forum with and start doing right away without having to mess around with any code. So in the top left-hand corner there, I've listed out 3 more resources, and those are websites that will enable you to compress images free of charge with a simple drag and drop interface. You just drag your image over, drop it in the box, it sits there and loads, and it gives you a compressed image. And so I did a little test here with this grumpy, confused looking man, pulled him off of Google. The original file, or the original image, excuse me, is on the left. It's about 250 kilobytes. And then on the right, we have the compressed image that I was able to produce after 1 iteration with Tiny JPEG, the first website listed there. And so overall, we got a 60% drop in file size. And so some of you might be thinking, okay, well, that's great, Ellis, but 250 kilobytes is not that big to begin with. Well, if you scale that out over hundreds, potentially thousands of images, and then you're able to drop that file size, you've got a significant savings of size, which will therefore increase your site load time, or rather lower it, excuse me. So I definitely recommend you guys play around with that. You know, that's one of those things where if you're looking to make your website faster, you could download all of your images, spend some time compressing them, send them into your account manager, and maybe have them re-implemented into the site, right? A question there. Sorry, we have a question? Sure. Yeah, no, it's actually a great point, because if I go back to this slide here, those tools where you can scan your website, it's real simple. You just drop in the URL, it scans it after a minute and gives you results. Those tools can drive you absolutely nuts, because what they'll do is they will continue to recommend that you keep optimizing your images to a point where they're just distorted, they don't look right. So that's where you have that balance of like human judgment versus a computer driving directions, right? I have found that generally, if you have an image, if in these results, if it's saying, hey, you could save like 2%, that's probably the threshold where you can say, all right, I've given it my all, this image is good to go. If you're getting recommendations of, hey, compress this image and save 50%, you know, file size, then maybe keep going with it. So does that answer your question, sir? Cool. Okay, all right, so the next thing I want to talk about is Open Graph Protocol. Fancy sounding word for a pretty simple concept. How many people here have shared something on a friend's Facebook wall? A couple people? All right. So for those who raised your hands, if you've ever had the experience of going and copying and pasting in the link and then watching Facebook load, sometimes it spits out a preview like the one on the left-hand side of the web page you're trying to send somebody. And you can see in the preview, the image is kind of chopped up and hard to see. It's not very comprehensible. And then on the right, I've got the same website after Open Graph Protocol has been implemented. So what's going on between those two photos? Open Graph Protocol is essentially a code format that allows you to dictate a specific image, title, and description for a web page when it is shared on a social wall, Facebook and Twitter. Doing this can be very advantageous, because if you are a service or organization, your hope is probably, like with the foundation, that people are really sharing your stories, right? People are also visual creatures. So they're more likely to click on the link on the right than the link on the left, only because they can comprehend what it is visually, right? So very easy thing to be able to implement into your site. If you are curious what your site pages look like, and if they are lacking Open Graph Protocol, you can use that link I put in the blue box there, developers.facebook.com/tool/debug. Simple tool. Paste in your URL, give it a scan, it'll show you exactly what it'll look like.
Can you do the same thing for LinkedIn?
For LinkedIn, LinkedIn actually runs off of Open Graph Protocol, believe it or not. So if you do this for Facebook, you'll kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because you'll take care of LinkedIn too. And then Twitter has its own protocol called Twitter Cards. Same theory, works exactly the same way. Google Rich Snippet Schema. This is similar in concept, but differs in its intent, right? So what Google Rich Snippet Schema does is it allows you to specify data that you want Google to really know about your brand or organization and feed it directly over to Google. So if you look at the example on the right, we've probably all seen this at some point, where you search for a company or an organization, you get this big card, right? And so the question becomes, well, how does Google know who the CEO is and what the customer service line is? And it's not by accident. It's because Open Graph Protocol has all of that information in there that Google can scan and then dump into their search results pages, right? So now the thing that makes rich snippet schema fascinating is there are probably thousands of different schemas, and you can read about them at schema.org. Restaurants is a popular one, stores, organizations, not-for-profits, the list goes on. And so you can format your data to specifically fall into one of those. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I want to give you guys some stuff that you can really start using right away. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, back on the Google schema, if you have a business account on Google, it has all that same information that we see there listed for IBM. It doesn't go pick that up, you still have to do it this way?
It will use it as a validation, but it won't inject it automatically. And one of the areas where that gets very advantageous is actually with those social icons there, because sometimes Google has a hard time differentiating where you're present, right? So Rich Snippet Schema has a directive in it called same as, and what that allows us to do is tell Google, hey, I'm IBM at www.ibm.com, but I'm also IBM when you're at facebook.com/IBM. And so that is sort of the directive that pulls all of that information together and aggregates it into a simple result like that.
Thank you.
Sure.
But I have to do it twice.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Google makes the rules, we just have to follow them, right?
You're not shooting a message.
Yeah.
Making sure I know my to-dos.
So if you look at Google Rich Snippet Schema, the actual code, you get very overwhelmed very quickly. It's very messy, very long, and very convoluted. There are a lot of tools that you can use to automate the process. This is a great one, technicalseo.com, and then just follow the links there. This tool will help you generate schema markup. And you can see there's a very generic one there at the top, website. So if you're not sure where a certain page falls, you can just default to that. And you follow a simple wizard tool, plug in the relative information, and then it sends you the code right afterwards, which you can then give to a developer to drop into place very quickly. It's literally a copy and paste job. So I suggest you guys, bookmark that, play around with it. There's also a validator, so you can test that code once it's implemented into your site. So great resource. So now we kind of enter into that second middle arm of this whole presentation where we're going to talk about making the most productive use out of traffic. So Dieter's going to take it from here and talk to you guys a little bit about that.
All right. Thanks, Ellis. So yeah, as Ellis mentioned, we have these great ways to drive people to our sites. So we want to know what to do when they come here. So first things first is we have to know who they are. Who is the audience that we're trying to connect with? So we want to know what age group they're in. Are they young? Are they old? Are they middle-aged? Because that's very important to direct them to certain content or make your website that's more visually appealing to one demographic more than another. And I bet you already know that a millennial will probably be a website different than somebody that's a little bit older. There's a totally different way that they do things. We also want to know, are they parents? Are they students? Are they male? Are they female? I don't want you to think you have to make it like a sexist website for one gender, but if you are primarily male or female, there might be colors that might be more interesting. So there's all these different components that can go into how you design, how you make your content, and we'll dig a little more into that. Yeah, we want to know why they're there. So this should line up with our macro and micro goals that we outlined earlier. And we start to then correlate that with who they are. What kind of devices do they use? So this gets a little bit more analytical, and you might have to go dig to see what kind of devices they're accessing your site on. So are they on mobile? Are they in desktop, tablets? This is going to be very important, and we'll discuss that just a bit here. And if you don't know, if you have no idea who your audience is, make an assumption, because it's much better to make an educated guess rather than just winging your site saying, hey, this looks good to me, when maybe it's not the best for your audience. So as we start talking about the actual layout and the core of your site, first thing comes up usually is responsive. For those that don't know what responsive is, it is the process of making your website expand, contract, and fit on all different devices from mobile to desktop, and everything looks good and is easy to navigate. So how many of you out here, by show of hands, have gone to a website and it is not mobile friendly and you immediately just hit the back button? Most of you, yeah. So I am just like that. I judge a website purely by their mobile website because, I mean, that's what I'm sitting on the couch all the time just going through websites. So, and that is why you have to have a mobile presence. Because what is it? 77% of Americans own a smartphone, and that is a very large number. So if you don't have a mobile presence, you are missing out on a very large chunk of your audience. And you might be thinking, you know, hey, I've had a responsive site for the last 5 years. This is no big deal, old news. But let's take it a step further, and we want to think what goes beyond mobile. If you're finding that the majority of your users are accessing your website on a mobile device, you want to cater specifically for them. So what we call for that is mobile up. So that this involves making your design, your content, everything that's interactive on your site is done from a mobile perspective up to desktop. When most, you know, over time or previously, a lot of people are like, oh, how does it look on desktop? I mean, very large images and looks great. But as time goes on, people want on a smaller device, so we need to cater to that. So that's where the demographic in your audience of, are they on mobile? Because that's going to be very important of how you make your decisions. So next up, as we talk more about kind of just the core of our website is accessibility. And you know, you may have already heard a bunch about this today, as we've had several presentations talking about it. And I'm here to reiterate it once again because it is very important. It's a very hot topic right now. Just to readdress it, you know, accessibility hits on 4 different things. Making your website perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Or in just simpler terms, your website needs to be accessible to all different people, whether or not they can view your website. Maybe they might be blind, or they just have a visual impairment. Maybe they just use their keyboard. All of these things need to be taken into consideration so that they can access your website. Because just like responsive, you may be missing out on a very large chunk of your audience. And in reality, some of you may already have to be accessible and you don't know it. It's something that is required for many different corporations or different organizations. But you might think, you know, that's not as fun. Like, I want to spend my time and money on a new design, on these new features. Well, accessibility does come with bonuses of enhancing your SEO, which drives more traffic because Google and other search engines, they will ping you for not being accessible. They will raise your site higher for having an accessible website. And also, again, like I mentioned, increase that target audience, which is what we're trying to accomplish here, to get your audience to where they need to go, to find that information, to sign up, to make that conversion. All right, so I'm going to get a little bit more scientific. And if you don't know already, the average person's attention span is less than that of a goldfish. So that you have 8 seconds or less to intrigue your users, to get them engage your website, to have them, you know, think, hey, wow, let's you know, see what's on here. Let's go through this. And you know, I want to show you real quick what I think is a website that does a fantastic job of this. And as by looking at you already see, I am joking. This is not going to be the best example. This website has a lot going on. I don't even know what half of it is. But hey, it is engaging. Let's give them that. I mean, hey, like, I want to click on everything here because I want to know what's going on here. But is it simple? Is it easy to figure out what is going on? No, absolutely not. So yeah, you engage somebody, it's cool, but it is not easy to use. So that's where we come into the second thing here, is we want to make sure our websites are simple. And not saying we need to dumb it down and, you know, not have anything cool on there. No, but it's more so having the right content, the right navigation, the right structure to really drive your users to where they need to go. So a really cool psychology law is called Hick's Law, which describes the time it takes for a person to make a decision as a result of the possible choices he or she has. Increasing the number of choices will increase the decision time. So basically, if you have a lot of stuff on your website, a lot of different options, you will lose users because they have too many options. They won't know what to do, so they drop off. Which leads directly into this next point. And this is probably, of this middle chunk of slides, this is what I think is the most important. And it goes beyond your demographics. I mean, you may already know who they are, who's coming to your website, but this describes a little more about what are they doing on your website. And this can be categorized into 3 different users: searchers, sorters, and browsers. So searchers, they're the ones that they find that search input on your website, and they type in exactly what they want to find. So in order to direct that type of user, you want a large search input. You want a large search icon that brings the search of it to be visible. And then there's sorters. Sorters are the ones that they start sorting through the main navigation or the top level links, and they start just going through all of those links up there. So in order to get all of your points across to that type of user, is you want to have clear and meaningful links. So if you may have a ton of content on your website, but you want to really organize in a way that is easy for them to figure out where they are going. Browsers are the ones that they start scrolling down your homepage or landing pages. They're looking for those nice images and call outs and just seeing kind of what's available on your website. So there's your three users that addressing these things will help you direct them to where they need to go. And if you have certain conversions that you want to make, you can start using those things to really direct your users. Yes?
It wasn't that long ago when we were talking about not burying things and having people that have to click through too many times to get to what they wanted, right? Because they would abandon if they
Absolutely.
click, 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 click. Which is a little bit the opposite of what we're saying here of don't put too much up front. Too many choices takes too long to decide. How do you sort of find the balance point there?
It's going to be really being prioritizing your content. So what are people hitting on your website? There's different tools. I mean, if you just go to maybe your Google Analytics, and maybe some of those pages aren't being hit as much as you think they are. So you want to start prioritizing the pages that are being addressed, quite frequently. So you can really start to categorize your different navigation, your structure to cater to your users, to your audience. Because I know many organizations in here might be, park districts or government where, there's content, there's a ton of content that you need to have on your website. But some of it may not be as important for your average day-to-day user. So many websites will use the search for the stuff that is a little more hidden because maybe not that many people use it. You still want to make sure you prioritize and make sure the most important information is up front and center.
And what's the rule of thumb these days about how many levels, how many clicks? No more than...
I think it changes, per the website. I mean, I honestly wouldn't go more than 3 in there because, people can start getting lost very quickly. But as long as you provide ways to find these, find the different information, it helps because they have multiple channels then for different ways to do it. But yeah, again, it really depends on the website and the content because sometimes it's inevitable for some of those things because that's just the type of site you have. And yeah, we could definitely help though in going through the analytics and driving that proper content.
Thank you.
Yes?
Are there any analytics about whether users prefer that when they click on a link on your website that it opens in a new window versus...
So generally, if the link is somewhere to go on it's going to a page on your website, you keep it in the same window. If it's going to a completely different website, you want to open in a new window. That's just the general rule of thumb. This also helps with accessibility greatly because, you can tell screen readers and other devices, hey, this link's going to a new page, new window. Be prepared for that. But it's much easier than to keep them on the site, keep it on your content. And it is inevitable. You got to link out to partners, to other organizations. But yeah, then you would want to have it open a new window so you keep the old window secure. Or, they can go right back to it when they need to. So.
Likewise, tabs versus old window.
Yeah. So now modern browsers, if we use kind of the default, the default syntax to open a new window, it will open a new tab. Some people have different settings that will change that, but that is generally what you would want to do is just a new tab. So, and I don't want to run out of time, but I want to show a quick site, not this one, of one of our clients, and actually they might be here, Anthony from HPD. I'm not sure if you are or not, but. All right. I think you guys do a fantastic job of prioritizing your content. I was looking through this website and, not being a normal user here, I found immediately that one of the main things to do here is to register. And I saw that from a couple different ways. As a sorter, I went to the main navigation, right in programs and events. We have register now at the top. We have online registration and as like a call out. It's right there for us. As a searcher, large search icon right there to help drive that type of user. As a browser, going through the homepage, registration is going on now. It's right there in front of you. All these different users are being targeted and through these different channels. And I think it's a great setup. And the rest of the content is very, very well categorized and easy to find. Yes?
Any accessibility issues with the scrolling of the banners like that? Your end is
Yeah, there can be accessibility issues with that. It's something that is difficult to address, but we can. Basically, we need to tell users that, okay, the slide changed, here's new content. That's where we get kind of fishy with having automatic slideshows because it's moving on its own. So all of a sudden, new content is coming out to a screen reader, and it's just like kind of hitting them in the face. So
I always hear things that nobody gets through, but I got internal people are like, we went from having a scrolling carousel to the market here, and now they're like, well, I can get it on the homepage, but well, you were 70, nobody was seeing it anyway.
right.
So I don't know.
The trend has been going a little bit more towards having just one hero image that kind of has the same information. But yeah, you also may want a slideshow with several different, different pieces that you want your users to hit. So it does work both ways, but I have seen a trend going more towards a single hero. It does make accessibility a little bit easier and just overall navigation of the site. All right. And I know we're going to be running out of time here, so I'll quickly go through content and layout. This kind of goes into, again, prioritizing your content. What is the most important? You may have some great looking images or great content that, this can be great for SEO, but are people actually going to it? Is it being hit like regularly? Is this something that you should have your main navigation or possibly more so in the footer? So you need to prioritize your content for your audience so that you can direct them to those conversions that you need them to be at. Another thing is keeping it very familiar. There's a reason that many websites have the logo in the top left corner because people know that's there. They can click on that to go to the homepage. So you may want a very cool design, which is, it definitely can work. I'm not saying it doesn't, but having familiarity on your website is just a great thing. You want to make sure that it's easy to read. Nobody likes reading just a big paragraph of text. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but if I go to a website, I see a nice order list with big bold headings for each topic. I just kind of go through the headings just because it's easier to read. And again, knowing your audience, that's key. You have a lot of content, a lot of great content, images, and things on your website. You need to know your audience and what they're actually there for. And finally, you may have, when I went to this slide, your eyes may have went directly to this button, this call to action button. You may not have read the top part first. And that's how powerful call to actions are, especially for those browsers on your website they're going down, they're looking for the big call out button. Hey, click here. I want you to go to this banner, to this event, to this registration, whatever it might be. They're very important. And to solidify all of our decision making, it comes A/B testing. Now this can be a much bigger topic, so I'll very quickly go through it. Where A/B testing is the process of analyzing your current website and a slightly modified, new designed website or web page of the same content. And you are changing around maybe where the form is, where the call out button is, how the content's situated, the colors you use. All those things change a user's perspective of it. So colors, those are huge. That's why I have a color motion guide. This is what all these different businesses on here, they use specific colors to target different audience members because color invokes emotion. Red can, it definitely can cause, anger, but it's also like, hey, click on me. This is bright and red, like click on me. But it also maybe you want a green button because, green means go and it's still bright. But you don't know until you actually test it. And just, again, a location of important elements. Because maybe your call outs are too low on the page. People aren't even seeing them, so you move them higher up on the page. All of these things help drive your users the way you need them to be driven. And, finally, we want to talk really quickly about getting people back to your website because that's very important. They're already going through your website, but you want them to keep coming back, more conversions, just more exposure. I'll let Alice continue with that.
Yeah, so it's kind of that third arm of the journey there, getting users to come back. Like I said at the beginning, that's really, to me, that is an indication of a very successful website, is when people are going to your site, they're enticed by what you have, and they're so enticed that they come back again and again and again to see what else you have to offer. So I wanted to put together a couple slides on some pointers to help you guys maximize content. And sort of my motivation for taking this angle was because very, very frequently, in fact, more frequently than not, I will talk to clients where my point of contact is somebody who their primary job is actually not the website. It's like a secondary task or maybe a third task. It's something that they were given the responsibility for at work because maybe they're the most technical person in the office or whatever the reason may be. So the point is that sometimes people in those positions don't have the time to sit around and create new content every single day. So how do you maximize your content and make the most of it if time is of the essence? This first slide here, this really just reiterates the importance of fresh content. The basic takeaway is that a website is a website that gets stale kind of loses its value. I think of this like a house. If you buy a house, you're not going to just leave it alone forever. You're going to do things over time that at a minimum maintain the value, if not improve it. So kind of having that mindset with a website is great. You just kind of keep adding to it little bits and pieces here and there, and you will grow the content value of it for your users. So maximizing content generation. What are some ways that you can take content and really stretch it out, max it out? Couple ideas. Writing updates to previously posted articles is a great way to slowly trickle in new content to your site. If you have maybe like a consulting firm, or if you just do something in a fast-paced industry where information is changing on the fly all the time, kind of like ours, update articles are very common and very popular because you can start with sort of one core theme and then branch it off multiple times, create many, many articles. And people tend to enjoy reading short form content, so that kind of thing is very attractive to users. Likewise, you can split long form content into multiple blog articles. This is actually something that we do here at Americaneagle.com for our blog. Most of the time when I write articles and send them to Renee to post on our website, they will end up splitting those up into 3 or 4 articles so that we can tell a more specific story in a shorter bracket of time, but then keep people looped in through the whole theme into the later pieces of content. Something that's very important that I want to call out when people are creating content, it's very easy to get kind of overwhelmed in terms of, well, what do I write for? How do I do this? How do I write for the web? I myself have struggled with that, and I break it down like this for myself and for others. Write for people, optimize for Google. So this can really be boiled down into some simple stuff. Writing for people, I literally mean write in a human voice, right? If you are writing an article where the subject matter is about how to handle difficult and stubborn employees in the workplace, write that article. Don't write an article about empirical-based evidence on facilitating a proactive work environment. I don't want to read that. You probably don't want to read that. I want to read the article that speaks to me as a person, like I'm a human, like we're having a conversation, right? And that's a trend we've seen in digital marketing in general, and actually just marketing, not just digital marketing, is that people really have this growing need to connect with a human brand. If you look at any of the advertising fiascos that have come out in the last few years, from Pepsi to a couple of the others, one of the elements that always gets talked about there is that human element of it. So the more human you can position your content, the better I think you'll relate to the people who are consuming it. On the flip side, we want to optimize for Google because that's how people are finding that content. So my advice would be to, once you've crafted your content, go back and optimize it for Google. And these things that I've put in this purple box here, for anyone who has dipped their toe into the pond of SEO, these things will probably look very familiar. These are sort of flagship on-page SEO factors. And it includes, include meta descriptions on your pages, have good H1 tags that include your keywords through your H2 to H6 tags as well. So you make sure that some of your keywords that you want to be ranking for are kind of evenly dispersed throughout your content, including in the headers, and then put alt tags in your images. So write for people first, go back and optimize for Google later, and as long as you kind of get into that pattern, I think you'll see a good degree of success with that. Lastly, analytics. Like I said, this is something that doesn't just have a place here, but really all throughout everything we've talked about. Analytics can give you great insight into every single thing that Dieter and I have mentioned. Just some quick pointers around analytics in case any of you are not heavily involved with it. On the left-hand side, I've got 3 very common but very good metrics that you can start to look into that'll start to help you understand the broader metrics of your site and then dive deeper. On the right, I called out some filters that you can be using. This is actually a big one and it's often overlooked. It's great that we can collect data on our websites, but if that data is not very clean, if it's kind of skewed and doesn't paint an accurate picture, it doesn't necessarily do a whole lot for us. So you can use these filters here to clean your data and to kind of walk you through them. Internal IPs, this is a great one if you have a huge office full of people, right? Because chances are that a lot of your Google Analytics data is actually people in your office, not your true audience, okay? So if you filter out all those internal IPs, you can work with your IT staff to get the IP range filtered all out, and then you'll be left with just the people externally viewing your site. And that's probably the real audience you're trying to speak to. Hostname filters and screen resolution filters. These are filters for getting rid of all those spam bots. If you're an analytics person and you're diving through your results, you'll find over time some kind of bizarre and wacky outcomes. A lot of that is because the internet is full of spam bots that crawl the web. They're not people, they're just programs. And when they hit your website, they'll show up as if they were a person who hit your website. Don't want them in there, right? We're not writing for bots, we're writing for people. So these are 3 great things you can do to kind of clean up your data. And one of the great things about Google Analytics is that you can have a master view where it's completely untouched, and then you can have your filtered view. So if you worry about implementing a filter wrong, like you're gonna mess it all up and really bork your data, you can still have that master view to go back to as a reference point. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just the utilization of goals and events within Google Analytics. This is gonna be a huge thing now and moving forward. What this will allow you to do is set up a goal in Google Analytics around a conversion, right? So, man, we talked earlier about somebody spending a minimum of 10 minutes on your testimonials page. In Google Analytics, you could set up a goal that measures exactly that. So once a month, you could see how many people hit that page with testimonials and spent a minimum of 10 minutes, and it would count it as a conversion. So it'll give you great insight into who's doing specifically what you want them to do. It kind of takes a little bit of the guesswork out of it, right? Likewise, you can set up triggers and goals into buttons. So if one of your micro conversions is to have people sign up for a newsletter, you can implement that as well. So that is it. Any questions? Yes, sir.
For the open graph protocol you're talking about that makes everything show up twice on Facebook, looks like it's meta tags. Does that have to be in the header of the website page?
Yep.
If so, then like maybe like the content management system, how do we get them into the header if we don't have access to that?
Sure. So great question. That's why I would recommend writing the Open Graph meta tags yourself. There's generators out there. I should have included one in here actually, but there are generators out there that can do that coding for you. And then you can send it over to your account manager. And from there, it's a pretty simple procedure to inject it in there, right? Now, the answer to that question kind of varies a little bit, and I should repeat it. I'm sorry for anyone who didn't hear. His question was, for Open Graph protocol, how do you actually get it into the site if you don't have the file access to do that? And so I was saying that there's generators, that can do that for him. But the reason it's going to vary is because certain CMSs allow different levels of access. So I come from a WordPress background. Speaking from that standpoint, there is a way to access those files, right? But if you're on Sitefinity or Kentico or Sitecore, or whatever it may be, you can either do that through FTP, through your account manager, maybe the CMS, depending on what the CMS offers. But your account manager can definitely steer you in the right direction on that one. Sure. Anybody else? For the record, for his goldfish statistic, I wanted to bring in live goldfish to give out as prizes, and I was told to not be the reason why the company has to create a policy on live animals in the workplace. So, yes, ma'am.
Is there a plugin that can actually help you compress the images you already have on the WordPress?
Yeah, great question. So it's a WordPress specific question. She wanted to know, are there any plugins available that will facilitate the crunching of image file sizes? The answer is yes. There's actually an abundance of them, some better than others. If you're going to research it, I would recommend looking into plugins that are API driven. So what that means is they use an external API. So you'll upload your image, it'll send the image off, crunch it, send it right back to your CMS, and add it to where you want to go. If you're looking for a good recommendation, there's one called Imagify. Pretty sure you can spell it phonetically. That's a great one. It's a subscription service. I think it's like $20 a month. It's very simple to implement. There's a bunch of other ones as well. Anyone else?
Well, thank you, everybody, and yeah, be sure to join us for the happy hour at the end of all the presentations. If you have any more questions, then please ask us. And yeah, thank you for coming.